There is a silence in the room that is not empty, but heavy, thick with the scent of dried lavender, old blood, and the metallic tang of fear. It is a silence that presses against the eardrums, a suffocating weight found only in the chambers where life and death dance their clumsy waltz. The year is 1726, and the age of reason is dawning over England like a cold, gray sun. Men of science are dissecting the heavens with telescopes and the human body with scalpels, confident that the universe is a machine they can dismantle and understand. But here, in a modest room in Godalming, the machine has broken. Reason has fled into the shadows, leaving behind something primal, something impossible. Imagine the sound first. It is not the cry of a newborn, that sharp, triumphant intake of breath that signals a soul entering the world. No, this sound is quieter. It is a scratching, a wet, frantic scrabbling like claws against parchment. The surgeon, a man of steady hands and sober mind named John Howard, leans forward, the candlelight flickering in his eyes, casting long, dancing shadows against the peeling plaster walls. He wipes sweat from his brow, though the November air is biting. What he pulls from the darkness of the birth canal is not a child. It is not human. It is a creature of fur and bone, a thing that belongs in the burrow, not the womb. The world outside is ordered. King George I sits upon his throne in London, surrounded by courtiers who speak of logic and empire. Yet here, in the dim periphery of the kingdom, a woman named Mary Toft is rewriting the laws of nature. She is poor, unlettered, a creature of the earth, yet she holds the attention of the highest minds in the land. They watch her with a mixture of revulsion and awe, their wigs perfectly powdered, their notebooks open, waiting to record a miracle or a monstrosity. Is it possible that the boundary between human and beast is so porous? Can the imagination of a mother imprint itself upon the flesh of her unborn? Or is there a darker alchemy at work, a deception so bold, so grotesque, that it blinds the very men who claim to see the clearest? As the candle burns low, guttering in its tallow pool, we are left to wonder, what happens when the men of science are confronted with a riddle that bites back? The shadows in the corner of the room seem to lengthen, taking on shapes that make the rational mind recoil. Stay with us. The night is long, and the truth is a burrow that goes deeper than you dare to imagine. Keep the candle lit. The darkness here has teeth. Chapter 1: The Surgeon and the Shadow. In the quiet town of Godalming, a local surgeon is summoned to a bedside where a storm is brewing. We explore the initial, terrifying moments of discovery, the visceral reality of the births, and the slow erosion of John Howard's skepticism as he holds the impossible in his hands. The wind howling across the Surrey heathlands in November carries a bite that goes deeper than the skin. It settles in the marrow, a persistent, aching reminder of the winter waiting in the wings. It is 1726, and the town of Godalming huddles against the cold, its chimneys exhaling gray plumes of wood smoke into a sky that seems permanently bruised with twilight. In this corner of the world, life is dictated by the rhythm of the seasons and the fragility of the flesh. Men live by the soil and die by the fever. It is a place of hard truths, where the veil between survival and ruin is as thin as a worn linen shirt. John Howard is a man who knows these truths better than most. He is a surgeon, a man midwife, a custodian of the body's grisly secrets. He deals in broken bones, festering wounds, and the bloody, perilous miracle of childbirth. His hands are rough, stained with the ink of his trade, dried blood, poultices, and the bitter residue of medicines that promise more than they can deliver. He is a man of science, or at least as much science as a country doctor can muster in an age where the humors still dictate the diagnosis. He believes in what he can see, what he can touch, what he can cut. He does not believe in ghosts. He does not believe in monsters. But when the summons comes, carried by a breathless messenger with mud splattered to his knees, it brings a frantic urgency that unsettles even Howard's practiced calm. The message is not the usual call to a difficult labor or a farm accident. It is a plea from the edge of reason. A woman is birthing, the messenger claims, but she is not bringing forth a child. Howard gathers his instruments, the silver forceps, the sharp knives, the probes, wrapping them in leather with a methodical slowness that belies his racing heart. He rides out into the gloom, his horse's hooves clattering against the frozen ruts of the road. The destination is a humble cottage, a structure of timber and wattle that seems to lean inward, as if crushing the secrets held within its walls. Stepping inside, the air changes instantly. The cold of the heath is replaced by a stifling, humid heat, heavy with the metallic tang of blood and the sour, anxious sweat of pain. A fire burns low in the grate, casting long, erratic shadows that dance against the ceiling beams like trapped spirits. In the center of the room, lying on a bed that has seen generations of birth and death, is Mary Toft. She is not a beauty of the court. She is a woman of the fields, her face etched with the lines of poverty and labor. But in this moment she is transformed by agony. Her body arches, her knuckles white as she grips the sheets, a guttural sound tearing from her throat that is half moan, half growl. Howard approaches the bedside, his professional mask slipping into place. He has seen women in labor 1,000 times. He knows the rhythm of contractions, the crowning of the head, the rush of fluids. But as he places his hands upon her abdomen, the landscape is wrong. The shape beneath the skin does not feel like the smooth curve of an infant's back or the hard sphere of a skull. It feels angular. It feels disjointed. There is a spasmodic jerking movement under his palms that makes him recoil instinctively. It is distinct, sharp, and utterly inhuman. He looks at the woman's face, searching for a sign of deception, but he sees only the raw, glazed look of a woman in the throes of expulsion. "Help me," she whispers, the words ragged. "It's coming." Howard positions himself. The room falls silent, save for the crackle of the fire and the labored breathing of the woman. He reaches into the birth canal, expecting the familiar. What his fingers brush against sends a jolt of ice through his veins. It is not skin. It is not the slick, wet scalp of a newborn. It is fur. He pulls his hand back, staring at his own fingers in the dim light, his mind racing to find a logical anchor. A cyst, a tumor covered in hair. Such things are recorded in the medical texts, teratomas, growths that mimic the components of life without the soul. He tells himself this is a medical anomaly, a tragedy of nature, but nothing supernatural. He steels himself. He must do his duty. He must deliver whatever this wretched thing is. He reaches in again, gripping the object. It gives way with a sickening ease. He pulls. What lands in the metal basin with a wet thud is not a tumor. It is a leg. A hind leg covered in dun-colored fur, the claws distinct and sharp, matted with blood and mucus. Howard stares at it, the breath trapped in his lungs. He looks at the severed limb, then back at the woman. The anatomy is undeniable. It is the leg of a rabbit. Before he can process the impossibility of the object, Mary cries out again. Her body convulses. There is more. Howard works with a kind of trance-like horror, removing piece after piece. A torso, skinned and raw, another leg, and finally the head. The dead eyes of a rabbit stare up at him from the basin, bathed in the fluids of a human womb. The room spins. The laws of biology, the certainty of his training, the very foundation of his reality, all of it fractures in the span of a single heartbeat. He stands there, a man of science holding the parts of a field animal delivered from a woman, and the shadows in the corners of the room seem to lean in closer, whispering that the world is not what he thought it was. The impossible does not ask for permission. It simply arrives, seating itself at the table of reality and refusing to leave. John Howard stands over the metal basin for a long time, the silence of the room broken only by the settling of the coals in the grate. The blood on his hands is cooling, turning tacky and dark, a stark contrast to the sterile silver of his instruments. He looks at the rabbit's head. It is not a phantasm. It is matter. It has weight, texture, and the grim, undeniable scent of death. He picks up the head. The eyes are clouded, the fur matted with the fluids of birth. In his mind, a frantic war is being waged between his training and his senses. Anatomy dictates that a woman cannot gestate a leporine fetus. The womb is a sanctuary for human life, not a burrow for beasts. And yet here it is. He checks the woman again. Mary Toft lies in a stupor of exhaustion, her breathing shallow, her skin clammy. There is no sign of deceit in her face, only the hollowed-out look of a vessel that has been used and discarded by forces beyond comprehension. For the next several days, the cottage in Godalming becomes a theater of the grotesque. Howard does not leave. He watches, he waits, and the births continue. It happens with a terrifying rhythm. The pains begin, sharp, violent contractions that ripple through Mary's abdomen like a tide. Howard intervenes, and each time the result is the same. Not a child, but pieces. A torso stripped of skin, the backbone of an eel, the paws of a cat, and then more rabbits. They come in fragments, as if the womb is acting not as a cradle of creation, but as a grinder, churning out the debris of the natural world. Howard collects them all. He finds jars, filling them with spirits of wine to preserve the specimens. He places the severed legs, the crushed skulls, and the strips of fur into the amber liquid, where they float like macabre trophies. The shelves of the cottage begin to look less like a home and more like an apothecary's nightmare. As he works, the surgeon's skepticism begins to erode, replaced by a zealous, terrifying conviction. He stops asking if this is happening and starts asking why. He turns to the medical texts in his mind, grasping for the theory of maternal impression, the ancient belief that a pregnant woman's desires or shocks can imprint themselves upon the fetus. Had Mary been frightened by a rabbit? Had she craved its meat with such violent intensity that her own body contorted the child into the object of her hunger? It is a theory that sits on the edge of folklore, but in this room, illuminated by flickering tallow, it feels like the only raft in a drowning sea. He cannot keep this to himself. The burden of the miracle is too heavy for one pair of shoulders. The secret demands to be shared. It demands to be validated. Howard sits at a small wooden table, dipping his quill into an inkwell that looks as black as the night outside. His hand trembles, spattering the parchment, but he forces the nib to the paper. He writes to men of influence. He writes to Henry Davenant, a courtier with the ear of the prince. He writes to the experts in London. He describes with clinical precision the monstrosities floating in his jars. He stakes his reputation, his career, and his sanity on the ink drying before him. "I have delivered the woman of the 17th rabbit," he writes, the words looking alien even as he forms them. "It is a thing most prodigious." He seals the letter with wax, pressing his thumb into the hot red pool. It is done. The courier takes the message, riding out of Godalming and onto the road that leads to the capital. Howard watches him go from the doorway, the cold wind ruffling his hair. He does not know it yet, but he has just released a contagion. The rabbit parts in the jars are dead, but the story is alive. It will travel faster than any plague, infecting the minds of the learned and the powerful, turning the age of reason into a carnival of fools. He turns back to the room, to the woman lying in the dark, and shuts the door, but the scratching sound has stopped. Now there is only the waiting. Chapter 2. The Chamber of Echoes. In the shadowed corners of Godalming, we trace the silhouette of Mary Toft before she became a monster. We descend into the crushing weight of 18th-century poverty, where hunger is a constant companion and survival is a daily negotiation with the earth. This chapter peels back the layers of the maternal impression theory, the pervasive belief that a mother's desire can warp the flesh of her unborn. We witness the moment of Genesis, not in a bed but in a frozen field, where a desperate woman chases a rabbit she cannot catch, setting in motion a psychological contagion that will consume a kingdom. To understand the monster, one must first understand the cage that forged it. Mary Toft was not born into history. She was born into the silence of the English peasantry, a vast, invisible ocean of souls whose names are written only in parish registers and on eroding headstones. In 1726, she is 24 or 25 years old, a woman of rough hands and broken nails, married to a journeyman cloth worker named Joshua. Theirs is a life measured in inches of wool and crusts of bread. Godalming is a town of industry, yes, but for the Tofts, it is a landscape of perpetual lack. Poverty here is not a tragic event. It is the weather. It is the damp in the walls, the draught in the window, the hollow ache in the belly that never quite resolves into fullness. Mary is a creature of this earth. She has borne children before. She knows the heaviness of the womb and the tearing of the birth. She is unremarkable in every way, a face in the crowd at the market, a figure bent over in the fields weeding for a few pennies a day. But poverty is a quiet architect. It builds pressure chambers within the human spirit. It creates a hunger that goes beyond the stomach, a craving for agency, for notice, for something, anything, to break the gray monotony of survival. The story that Mary weaves for John Howard, the story that will become the bedrock of this Gothic tower, begins in the fields. It is April, 5 months before the births begin. The spring air is crisp, filled with the scent of wet loam and new growth. Mary is working, her back aching, her hands stained with soil. She is pregnant again, carrying the heavy, familiar burden of another mouth to feed. As she works, she sees them. Rabbits. They are bounding through the furrows, flashes of brown and white, chaotic and free. To a well-fed observer, they are vermin or perhaps pets. To Mary Toft, standing in the mud with a hollow stomach, they are meat. They are luxury. They are a hot stew on a cold night, the grease coating the tongue, the protein knitting together the weary muscles. He describes a compulsion that seizes her, a desire so violent it feels like a possession. She throws down her hoe, she runs. A pregnant woman chasing rabbits across a furrowed field, stumbling, gasping, driven by a primal, ravenous need. She tries to catch one, but they are too fast. They vanish into the hedgerows, leaving her panting and empty-handed. But the image of them remains. It burns into her mind. She dreams of them. She craves them. She buys a rabbit from a neighbor, but it is not enough. She eats, but the hunger remains, a phantom mouth screaming inside her. This is the seed of the nightmare. It is here that we encounter the maternal impression, a concept that strikes the modern mind as absurdity but held the 18th century imagination in a vice grip. It was the belief that the imagination of a pregnant woman was a potent, dangerous force. A mother who gazed too long at a painting might birth a child with the face of a saint. A mother who was frightened by a fire might bear an infant with red skin. And a mother who chased rabbits, who consumed them with her eyes and her mind, might find her womb becoming a warren. Howard listens to this account, and the pieces of the puzzle click into a terrifying alignment. He looks at the woman in the bed, recounting her desperate chase in the April fields, and he does not see a liar. He sees a victim of her own biology. The rabbit parts in the jars are no longer just random debris. They are the physical manifestation of a psychological scar. The womb has acted as a dark mirror, reflecting the mother's obsession back into the world, twisted and literal. It is a seductive narrative. It creates a bridge between the impossible biology he is holding in his hands and the accepted medical folklore of his time. It explains the unexplainable. It turns a monster into a tragedy. Howard looks at the severed paws floating in the spirits of wine, and he thinks he understands. He thinks he sees the cause and the effect. But he is looking at the shadow on the wall, not the object casting it. He is listening to the story of a simple woman broken by longing, failing to see the glint of calculation in her eye. The rabbit chase in the field may have been real, or it may have been a fabrication, but the trap it set was solid steel. And John Howard, the man of science, has just stepped right into it. The quill scratches against the parchment, a dry, rhythmic sound that mimics the clawing John Howard claims to hear inside the womb. He is writing the final report of the initial events, compiling a dossier of the impossible. He lists the dates, the times of the contractions, and the grisly inventory of what was expelled. 3 legs of a cat of a tabby color, the backbone of an eel, 9 baby rabbits, dead but perfectly formed. The ink dries black and permanent, sealing the hallucinations of the cottage into the official record of history. Howard sends these letters out like carrier pigeons into a storm. He writes to Henry Davenant, a courtier living nearby who serves as a conduit to the crown. He writes to other surgeons. He invites them to come, to see, to touch. There is no hesitation in his hand, no tremor of doubt. He has passed the point of skepticism and entered the realm of the zealot. He needs witnesses not to test the truth, but to consecrate it. The road from Godalming to London is 30 miles of hard-packed dirt and stone, winding through the heath and into the choking smog of the capital. But rumor travels faster than a coach and four. The story of the rabbit woman bleeds out of Surrey and infiltrates the city. It moves through the veins of the nation, from the roadside taverns where travelers whisper over tankards of ale, to the opulent coffee houses of Covent Garden, where men of influence trade gossip like currency. London in 1726 is a city of duality. It is the center of the Enlightenment, a place where Isaac Newton has mapped the gravity of the stars and the Royal Society seeks to catalogue every leaf and stone in the empire. It is a city of light, of reason, of geometric order. But beneath the powdered wigs and the silk waistcoats, there beats a heart that is ancient and superstitious. The city remembers the plague pits. It remembers the Great Fire. It remembers the witches. The veneer of logic is thin, and the story of Mary Toft cracks it wide open. "Have you heard?" the whispers go. "A woman in Godalming, she births rabbits." At first there is laughter. The satirists sharpen their pens. The wits of the town chuckle at the ignorance of the country bumpkins. Surely this is just another tall tale from the provinces, like two-headed calves or raining frogs. But then comes the testimony. Howard is a respected man, a man of 30 years' experience. He is not known for flights of fancy, and he has the specimens. The jars of spirits are traveling too, carried by Davenant to the capital to be displayed like holy relics. The laughter dies down, replaced by a morbid, hungry silence. The theory of maternal impression is dragged out of the medical archives and debated in the salons. Could it be true? Could the mind of a peasant woman override the laws of God? If a woman can turn a child into a rabbit simply by wanting one, what else is the human body capable of? The order of the world feels suddenly unstable, as if the ground beneath London has turned to water. Mary Toft is no longer a woman. She is a question mark burned into the side of the English countryside. She is a blank canvas upon which the fears and fascinations of an entire era are being projected. To the religious, she is a sign of God's wrath or a demonic miracle. To the scientists, she is a biological anomaly that must be dissected. To the public, she is a spectacle, a freak show that has burst the bounds of the fairground and entered the realm of reality. And in the highest tower of the land, the story reaches the ears of the king. George I, the German-speaking monarch who views his English subjects with a mixture of perplexity and duty, listens to the reports. He does not dismiss them. Kings, after all, are the custodians of the realm's strange magic. If there are monsters in Surrey, they are his monsters. He summons his own men, the elite of the medical world, and gives them a simple command: go, see, and tell me if the world has gone mad. The wheels of the royal carriage begin to turn. The isolation of the cottage is over. The candle has been lit in the window, and now the moths are coming. Chapter 3: A Court of Whispers. The contagion travels. We leave the suffocating intimacy of the cottage for the sprawling, choking smog of London. This chapter charts the anatomy of a rumor in the 18th century, tracing the story of the rabbit woman as it infiltrates the coffee houses, the Royal Society, and finally, the gilded halls of St. James's Palace. We witness the collision between the high-minded age of enlightenment and the deep, superstitious roots of the populace. King George I, a monarch estranged from his own subjects by language and culture, is drawn into the spectacle, transforming a medical anomaly into a matter of the crown. London, in the winter of 1726, is a city drowning in its own breath. The fog rolls off the Thames in thick, yellow waves, mixing with the smoke of 100,000 coal fires to create a smog that tastes of sulfur and gin. It is a labyrinth of brick and stone, a place where the Enlightenment is fighting a desperate war against the ancient filth of the streets. Here, the coffee houses of Covent Garden buzz with the electricity of news. Men in periwigs and velvet coats huddle over porcelain cups, trading stocks, secrets and scandals with equal fervor. The city is a beast that demands to be fed, and it has a ravenous appetite for the grotesque. Into this hungry maw, the letters of John Howard fall like sparks into dry tinder. The story of Mary Toft does not creep into the capital, it explodes. It travels from the lips of the courier to the ears of the innkeeper, from the scullery maid to the lady in waiting. "A woman in Surrey," they whisper, the words fogging in the cold air. "She is birthing rabbits." At first, the reaction is the cynical laughter of the metropolis. The satirists of Grub Street, always eager for a victim, dip their pens in acid. They mock the credulity of the country folk, making bawdy jokes about the appetites of women and the gullibility of village doctors. But the laughter is short-lived. It catches in the throat when the physical evidence arrives. Henry Davenant, the courtier who has seen the births with his own eyes, brings the preserved specimens to town. The jars are placed on tables in private salons. The murky spirits of wine slosh against the glass, revealing the undeniable reality of fur and bone. The laughter dies. A creeping unease takes its place. The age of reason is supposed to be a fortress of logic, a time when the shadows of superstition are banished by the light of classification and anatomy. But here is a thing that refuses to be classified. If a woman can birth a beast, then the walls of the fortress are made of paper. The rumor climbs the social ladder with terrifying speed. It bypasses the merchants and the lawyers and ascends the grand staircase of St. James's Palace. King George sits at the center of this web. He is a German king on an English throne, a man often bewildered by the strange, raucous customs of his new subjects. He speaks broken English. He prefers his Hanoverian mistresses. He is a man of pragmatism, not fantasy. But he is also a king, and in the 18th century, the king is the ultimate arbiter of truth. The story is brought to him not as a joke, but as a matter of state concern. His daughter-in-law, Caroline, the Princess of Wales, is a woman of fierce intellect and curiosity, a correspondent of philosophers and scientists. She hears the rumors and does not laugh. She understands the implications. If this is a hoax, it is a sedition against the natural order, a mockery of the medical men who serve the crown. If it is true, it is a miracle that redefines the very nature of humanity. The court becomes a theater of whispers. In the long, candle-lit galleries, aristocrats debate the theory of maternal impression with hushed intensity. They speak of the woman in Godalming as if she were a mythical figure, a sphinx crouching in the Surrey mud. The boredom of the court is shattered. They are no longer talking about taxes or treaties. They are talking about rabbits. The pressure mounts. The king cannot ignore a phenomenon that has captivated his capital. He cannot allow his reign to be defined by a biological mystery that goes unsolved. He needs eyes on the ground. He needs a man who can cut through the fog of rumor with the sharp blade of science. He needs his anatomist. The choice falls upon Nathaniel St. André. He is a man who fits the moment perfectly, ambitious, flamboyant, and possessed of a confidence that borders on arrogance. He is the surgeon anatomist to the royal household, a man who has risen high by virtue of his skill with the knife and his ability to charm the powerful. He is summoned to the king's presence. The mandate is simple, though the implications are vast. Go to Godalming, see the woman, and tell us what is real. As St. André prepares his carriage, checking his instruments and his velvet coat, he believes he is embarking on a mission of debunking. He believes he will ride out to the country, expose a simple fraud, and return to London covered in glory. He does not know that he is riding out of the light and into a shadow that will swallow him whole. Nathaniel St. André travels not merely in a carriage, but in a capsule of his own self-assurance. He rides alongside Samuel Molyneux, the secretary to the Prince of Wales, a man of letters and astronomy, a telescope maker who is accustomed to looking at the stars, not the gutter. Together, they represent the twin pillars of the establishment, the court and the academy. They rumble down the Portsmouth Road, leaving the smoke of London behind for the open, rain-lashed heath. Inside the velvet-lined cabin, the air smells of pomander and leather. They speak of anatomy, of the impossible nature of the reports, dissecting the rumor with the scalpels of their wit before they have even seen the patient. They are driving toward a farce, yet they believe they are driving toward a simple exposure of rural ignorance. But the Godalming they arrive in is no longer the sleepy market town of a week prior. It has been transformed by the gravity of the event. The inn is full. The streets are buzzing with a dark, electric energy. John Howard meets them at the door of the cottage. He is a changed man. The fatigue hangs off him like a wet coat, his eyes bright with the fever of the believer. He does not bow and scrape before the king's men. He ushers them in with the urgency of a prophet revealing a holy relic. He has the jars, yes, but he promises them something more. He promises them the act itself. St. André steps into the sick room, stripping off his fine coat, rolling up the sleeves of his white shirt. He is a man of action, a man who trusts his fingers more than his ears. He approaches the bed. Mary Toft lies there, a tableau of suffering, her face pale, her pulse thumping a frantic rhythm against the surgeon's touch. The room is stiflingly hot, the fire piled high to ward off the November chill, creating an incubator for the impossible. The examination begins. St. André is thorough. He is not a fool, he knows where a deception might hide. He checks the bedclothes. He checks the woman's person. He finds nothing but flesh and fluids. And then the contractions begin. It is a performance of visceral power. Mary cries out, her body arching, the muscles of her abdomen rippling in spasms that no actress could fake without a terrifying commitment to the role. St. André leans in. He waits, and then he feels it, the movement inside, the scratching. When he delivers the 15th rabbit, it is not with the detached observation of a skeptic, but with the breathless shock of a convert. He pulls the creature from the birth canal, a trunk stripped of skin, the heart still warm, the lungs soft and pink. He holds it in his hands, the blood of the woman mixing with the fluids of the beast. He calls for water. He performs the hydrostatic test, dropping the lungs into a bowl. They float. To a man of 18th century medicine, this is the seal of truth. Floating lungs mean the creature has breathed air. It means it was alive. It means it lived inside her. The logic is flawed, of course. Lungs can be inflated artificially, air can be trapped. But in the heat of the moment, with the firelight flickering and the woman moaning, the logic holds. St. André looks at Molyneux. The astronomer looks back, his eyes wide. The stars have fallen to earth. The skepticism that St. André carried from London evaporates, replaced by a darker, heavier substance. Wonder. He has touched the miracle. He has delivered it. He does not see the sleight of hand, the careful insertions made hours before, the suffering of the woman who has turned her body into a magician's hat. He sees only what he wants to see, a discovery that will immortalize his name. He is no longer the king's inquisitor. He is the rabbit woman's high priest. He takes the specimens. He takes the uterus of a cat that was also expelled, a grotesque piece of offal that he cradles like a diamond. He prepares to return to London, but he does not return as a debunker. He returns as a herald. He will tell the king, he will tell the court, he will tell the world. The impossible is true. The rabbit lives. As the carriage rattles back toward the capital, carrying the king's anatomist and his jars of horrors, the tragedy is sealed. The hoax has jumped the barrier. It has infected the highest levels of power. The curtain has fallen on the first act, and the players are moving to a larger stage, unaware that the ground beneath them is already beginning to rot. Chapter 4. The Anatomist's Eye. The infection of belief reaches the heart of the empire. Nathaniel St. André returns to London, not as a skeptic, but as an apostle of the impossible. We witness the surreal collision of the barnyard and the throne room as the specimens are presented to King George I at St. James's Palace. This chapter explores the dangerous architecture of the expert mind, how intelligence can be weaponized against itself. We watch St. André perform public dissections of the supernatural rabbits, explaining away anatomical impossibilities with intricate, blinding jargon, sealing his reputation inside a tomb of his own making. The carriage ride back to London is a journey through a fever dream. Nathaniel St. André sits in the rattling dark, the jars of spirits sloshing beside him, the fluid turning murky with the motion of the road. He is a man possessed. The skepticism that armored him upon his departure has been stripped away, replaced by a terrifying, luminous certainty. He has touched the miracle. He has felt the warmth of the creature leaving the human vessel. In the privacy of his mind, he is already composing the sentences that will announce this wonder to the world, sentences that he believes will carve his name into the marble of history alongside Harvey and Newton. He does not know he is carving an epitaph. He arrives at St. James's Palace, a sprawling complex of Tudor brick that smells of beeswax, damp wool, and the accumulated dust of centuries. The court is a mechanism of strict protocol, a place where every bow and every whisper is choreographed. But St. André carries chaos in his hands. He bypasses the usual gatekeepers, propelled by the gravity of his news. He is the king's anatomist, and he brings word of a new species of subject. The scene that unfolds in the king's private chambers is a tableau of the absurd. King George I, a man of heavy-lidded eyes and pragmatic German sensibilities, stands by the fireplace. He is surrounded by the high priests of the court, the queen's secretaries, the royal physicians, the ladies-in-waiting who crane their necks like swans to catch a glimpse of the horror. St. André places the specimens on a table inlaid with gold and mother-of-pearl. The contrast is violent, the raw, pickled flesh of the rabbits against the refined elegance of the monarchy. St. André speaks. He is a performer at heart, and this is his greatest role. He recounts the labor in Godalming with theatrical precision. He describes the contractions, the pulse, the position of the bones. He lifts a preserved leg from the jar, the spirits dripping onto the polished wood. He invites the king to look. The king leans in. The room holds its breath. Here, the rational power of the state meets the primal chaos of the earth. St. André explains the hydrostatic test again. The lungs floated, ergo, the rabbits lived. He weaves a tapestry of medical jargon, using Latin terms to dress up a barnyard fraud. He speaks of cornua uteri and fallopian tubes, using the language of science to sanctify a fairy tale. The king listens. He is intrigued. He does not recoil. There is a seduction in the monstrous that appeals even to kings. If nature can break its own laws in his kingdom, does it not make his reign exceptional? He orders St. André to document everything. He orders the specimens to be kept safe. He essentially gives the royal seal of approval to the investigation. St. André leaves the presence of the monarch soaring on a thermal of hubris. He has convinced the king. Therefore, it must be true. But the tragedy of the anatomist is not just in his belief. It is in his defense of it. Back in his own quarters, surrounded by his books and his blades, St. André begins the work of validation. He dissects the rabbits he brought back. He lays them open on his table, pinning back the fur, exposing the organs to the light of his lamp. And here the eye of the anatomist fails him. Or rather, it sees too much and too little. He looks at the stomach of the rabbit. It contains hay. It contains corn. A rational mind, a mind not clouded by the desire for glory, would stop here. A rational mind would ask, how does a rabbit inside a human womb eat hay? How does it find corn in the darkness of the uterus? It is a contradiction that screams of fraud. But St. André is no longer rational. He is a theologian of the rabbit. He looks at the hay and he constructs a bypass. He theorizes that perhaps the maternal impression is so strong, so total, that the mother's body not only creates the rabbit but creates the food for the rabbit. Or perhaps the rabbits were formed long ago and the mother ate the hay herself, passing it through the blood. He creates epicycles of logic to preserve the core delusion. He writes his short narrative of an extraordinary delivery of rabbits, a pamphlet that will soon be printed and sold on every street corner in London. He describes the anatomy of the beasts with loving, fatal detail. He praises the rectum and the intestines, marveling at their perfection. He is a man building a cathedral on a swamp, laying brick after brick of intricate observation on a foundation of mud. He invites others to come and see. He holds court in his home, showing the dissected rabbits to other doctors, to philosophers, to the curious elite. He challenges them to find a flaw in his reasoning, and many, intimidated by his confidence and the king's interest, nod their heads. They too see the hay and say nothing. The anatomist's eye has become a lens that distorts the world, bending the straight lines of reality until they form the shape of a monster. He believes he is leading the world into a new age of biological understanding. In truth, he is leading them off a cliff. Chapter 5. The Migration of Embarrassment. The spectacle grows too large for the timber walls of a country cottage. Mary Toft is moved from the obscurity of Godalming to the bustling market town of Guildford, transforming from a patient into an exhibit. We explore the circus atmosphere that begins to surround her, the crowds pressing against the windows, the influx of lesser doctors, and the crushing weight of celebrity. This chapter examines the logistics of a miracle, the frantic energy of John Howard as he tries to manage the stage, and the growing pressure that begins to crack the edges of the performance. A miracle like a fire consumes the oxygen in a room. The humble cottage in Godalming, with its low ceilings and peeling plaster, can no longer contain the heat of the story. It was a place for secrets, for whispered confessions and shadowed births, but now the secret has been shouted from the rooftops of London. The road to the Toft residence is no longer a quiet country track. It is a pilgrimage route. Curiosity seekers, vagrants, minor gentry, and the inevitable swarm of pamphleteers clog the mud, craning their necks to catch a glimpse of the woman who breeds beasts. The privacy required for the deception is evaporating, replaced by the suffocating crush of fame. John Howard makes a decision. The stage must be moved. The production has outgrown its rehearsal space and demands a theater worthy of its audience. On a gray morning under a sky that threatens snow, Mary Toft is bundled into a carriage. She is no longer merely a wife or a mother. She is a national asset, a biological curiosity that belongs to the public. She leaves her home, her husband Joshua trailing behind like a ghost, and is transported to Guildford, the county town, a place of commerce and noise. The journey is short, but the psychological distance is vast. In Godalming she was Mary, the woman the neighbors knew. In Guildford she is the Rabbit Woman, a title that strips away her humanity and replaces it with a headline. She is installed in a private room at a large inn, a space that is immediately transformed into a makeshift maternity ward and a court of inquiry. The windows are draped to keep out the prying eyes of the mob that gathers in the street below, chanting her name, betting on the number of rabbits she will produce next. Inside the room, the atmosphere is stifling. The intimacy of the early days is gone. Now, John Howard is not just a doctor, he is a ringmaster. He moves with a frantic, nervous energy, his wig askew, his hands perpetually stained. He is the guardian of the phenomenon, the gatekeeper who decides who gets to see the miracle and who must wait in the hall. He is basking in the attention, certainly. What country surgeon would not revel in the gaze of the royal household? But beneath the pride there is a vibrating tension. The lie is a hungry thing. It demands constant feeding. The births continue in Guildford, but the rhythm has changed. It is no longer the slow, terrifying discovery of the unknown. It has become a production line. Mary lies in the bed, the center of a swirling hurricane of activity. She is exhausted, her body a battlefield of simulated labor and real pain. She must perform on command. When a dignitary arrives, the pains must start. When a skeptic frowns, a rabbit must appear. The sheer physical toll of inserting and expelling animal parts, day after day, is etching deep lines of trauma into her face. She is pale, sweating, her eyes darting around the room like a trapped animal, mirroring the creatures she claims to birth. The logistics of the fraud in this new environment are staggering. In the cottage, Joshua could slip out to the Warrens, buy a rabbit, dismember it in the woodshed, and pass the parts to his wife in the quiet of the night. But here, in a busy inn surrounded by watchers, the supply line becomes a high-wire act, Accomplices must be found, porters, nurses, people willing to turn a blind eye for a coin. The rabbits must be procured, killed, stripped, and secreted into the room under the noses of the finest medical minds in England. It is a testament to the chaos of the scene that they manage it at all. The room is so crowded, so thick with smoke and ego, that the sleight of hand happens in the blind spots of the expert's arrogance. Yet the spectacle is mesmerizing. The shelves of the inn-room fill with more jars. The table groans under the weight of the dead. Howard invites local physicians to witness the events, expanding the circle of complicity. These men, eager to be associated with the king's anatomist and the famous Mr. Howard, nod their heads and sign their names to witness statements. "I felt the jump," they say. "I saw the foot." They are caught in a collective hysteria, a social contagion where doubting the rabbit means doubting the king's own man, St. André. But the move to Guildford has a cost. It brings the story closer to the light. The chaotic carnival atmosphere attracts not just the believers but the wolves. The noise of the crowd masks the sound of the cracks forming in the foundation, but they are there. A performance cannot last forever. The curtain must eventually fall, or the stage must collapse. And on the road from London, a carriage is approaching that carries men who do not believe in fairy tales, men who bring with them the cold, hard light of scrutiny that will burn the circus to the ground. Chapter 6: The King's Men. Belief is a fragile thing. It cracks under the weight of a cold stare. This chapter marks the arrival of the counterforce. King George I, though intrigued, is not a fool. He dispatches his German surgeon, Cyriacus Ahlers, and later the renowned Sir Richard Manningham, to Guildford. We witness the shift from observation to interrogation. The room in the inn ceases to be a shrine and becomes a battlefield of wits. This is the clash between the believers, blinded by their own desire for glory, and the skeptics, armed with the silent, terrifying weapon of patience. If Nathaniel St. André was the fire that fueled the hysteria, Cyriacus Ahlers is the bucket of ice water sent to douse it. He arrives in Guildford on the 20th of November, a Sunday. He is not a flamboyant man of the London social scene. He is a German, a member of the king's personal Hanoverian household, a man whose loyalty is to the crown's dignity, not the public's entertainment. He steps out of his carriage not with a flourish, but with the grim determination of an auditor entering a bankrupt bank. He enters the room at the inn and the temperature seems to drop. John Howard, still riding the high of his celebrity, greets him with the usual patter, the rehearsed spiel about the prodigious birth. But Ahlers does not nod. He does not gasp. He simply watches. He stands by the bed, his hands clasped behind his back, his eyes moving from the sweating face of Mary Toft to the nervous hands of the country surgeon. He is looking for the strings. When the labor begins, Ahlers moves in. He does not let Howard control the theater. He places his own hands on Mary's abdomen. He feels the spasmodic jumping, the violent lurching that had convinced St. André of a living beast within. But Ahlers feels something else. He feels the tension of the rectus abdominis muscles. He feels the deliberate, rhythmic contraction of a woman forcing her body to mimic a spasm. He looks at her face. She is in pain, yes, but is it the pain of birth or the pain of performance? He removes a rabbit part during the delivery. He holds it up to the light, turning it over in his fingers. He does not marvel at it. He inspects it like a butcher inspects a cut of meat. He notes the condition of the skin, the texture of the bone. He says little. In the high-stakes poker game of the delivery room, Ahlers is holding a royal flush, but he keeps his face a mask of stone. He leaves Guildford with specimens, but not with a conversion story. Back in London, he examines the parts with a cynicism that St. André lacked. He notes that the dung pellets inside the rabbit's colon contain corn, yes, but he also notes something even more damning. The rectum has been cut. Not torn by natural forces, but cut with a tool. A knife. The evidence of human interference is microscopic, but to the skeptical eye, it is as loud as a cannon blast. But the king is not satisfied with one opinion. The stakes are too high. And so the heavy artillery is summoned. Enter Sir Richard Manningham. Manningham is the Knight Bachelor of British obstetrics, the most famous man midwife in the land. He is a man of immense gravity, a figure whose reputation is built on the scientific management of birth. He arrives in Guildford not to spectate, but to judge. If Allers was the auditor, Manningham is the judge, jury, and executioner. The atmosphere in the room shifts from a circus to an interrogation cell. Manningham does not care for the jars or the stories. He focuses on the anatomy of the mother. He examines Mary Toft with a clinical ruthlessness that borders on cruelty. He checks the cervix. He checks the dilation. He knows what a womb looks like after birthing a child. He knows the size, the feel, the smell. And what he finds does not match the story. The uterus is thick, yes, but it does not have the gaping trauma one would expect from passing the skull of a rabbit. He watches John Howard. He sees the sweat on the surgeon's brow, the way his hands shake when he reaches for the forceps. Manningham begins to apply pressure. He does not accuse them outright, not yet. He simply asks the impossible questions. Why does the pulse not rise? Why is the milk not flowing? Why do the rabbits only come when the door is closed? The tension in the room becomes physical. Mary Toft lies between these men like a piece of meat being fought over by wolves. She can feel the skepticism radiating from Manningham. She knows that her performance, which fooled the country doctor and the flamboyant anatomist, is failing under the gaze of the master. She tries to produce another rabbit, groaning, thrashing, pleading with her body to expel the deception. But the trick is harder now. The eyes watching her are too sharp. Manningham stays his hand. He does not expose them in the moment. He wants the full truth. He wants to catch them not just in a lie, but in the act. He decides that the stage in Guildford is too compromised, too full of shadows where a rabbit might be hidden. To find the truth, he needs to control the environment completely. "We go to London," he declares. It is not an invitation. It is an order. The circus is being shut down. The king's men are taking the monster to the capital, where there are no woodsheds, no sympathetic neighbors, and nowhere left to hide. Chapter 7. The Theater of the Absurd. The hoax reaches its zenith in the heart of the metropolis. Mary Toft is brought to London, installed at Lacey's Bagnio in Leicester Fields. The quiet horror of the cottage is replaced by the roar of the city. This chapter paints the scene of the crowded bathhouse, transformed into a grotesque salon where dukes and doctors jostle for a view of the miracle. We explore the suffocating pressure of the capital, the manic energy of a lie stretched to its breaking point, and the desperate, frantic attempts to maintain the illusion as the eyes of the entire world watch. London does not welcome Mary Toft. It swallows her. On the 29th of November, the carriage rattles over the cobblestones of Leicester Fields, entering a square that is seething with humanity. The news of her arrival has preceded her, carried on the wind of gossip that blows through every alleyway. The mob is waiting. They press against the railings, a sea of faces distorted by curiosity and gin, shouting her name, jeering, cheering, demanding to see the woman who has turned the natural order upside down. The Rabbit Woman, they cry, a title that is half accolade, half curse. She is ushered into Lacey's Bagnio, a fashionable bathhouse usually reserved for the cleansing of the wealthy. The irony is thick enough to taste. A place designed for washing away the filth of the city is now the stage for its dirtiest deception. Mary is installed in a room that is far too small for the destiny it must contain. The door closes against the mob, but the noise penetrates the walls, a constant, low-frequency roar that vibrates in the teeth. Inside, the scene is a tableau of madness. The privacy of the medical examination is abandoned entirely. The room is packed. There are no longer just doctors. There are dukes, earls, and the curious elite of St. James's. They stand shoulder to shoulder, their powdered wigs brushing against the low ceiling, their perfumes, lavender, musk, ambergris, waging a losing war against the smell of sweat and unwashed bodies. They have come to see a show. They have placed bets at White's Chocolate House on the timing of the next birth. The creation of life has been reduced to a spectator sport, a blood sport where the quarry is the truth. In the center of this suffocating crush lies Mary. She is no longer the sturdy peasant woman who chased rabbits in the field. She is a wreck. Her skin is gray, her eyes sunken into dark hollows of exhaustion. The journey, the constant labor, the infection setting in from the crude surgeries of the fraud, it is killing her. She lies on the bed, a prisoner of her own fame, surrounded by men who view her not as a patient, but as a puzzle box to be solved. Nathaniel St. André is there, manic and desperate. He is the ringmaster of this circus, hopping from foot to foot, explaining the miracle to anyone who will listen, trying to drown out the growing murmurs of doubt with a torrent of Latin. He needs a rabbit. He needs a rabbit now. The crowd is getting restless. The king is waiting for a report. St. André looks at Mary with pleading eyes, silently begging her to perform the impossible one more time. But the trick is faltering. The supply lines have been cut. In Godalming, Joshua Toft could prowl the woods. In Guildford, a porter could be bribed. But here, under the unblinking gaze of Sir Richard Manningham, under the watchful eyes of the High Constable of Westminster who guards the door, how does one smuggle a dead animal into a woman's bed? The atmosphere in the bagnio shifts from anticipation to a tense, grinding standoff. The pains come, or Mary feigns them with all the strength she has left, thrashing on the mattress, screaming until her voice is a ragged whisper. But nothing appears. The hours drag on. The fire in the grate burns low, casting long shadows that seem to mock the assembled experts. The great men of science check their watches. They whisper behind their hands. The word fraud begins to circulate, no longer a question, but a statement of impending fact. The pressure on Mary is unimaginable. She is trapped in a lie so vast it has its own gravity. To confess now is to admit to treason against the laws of nature and the dignity of the crown. To continue is impossible. She is a rat in a maze where every corridor leads to a trap. She looks at the faces around her, the hungry, the skeptical, the fanatical, and she realizes she is alone. The applause is ending. The house lights are coming up. And in the harsh glare of London, the monster she created is about to turn on her. Chapter 8. The Unraveling Thread. Every tapestry, no matter how intricate, hangs by a single thread. In the suffocating heat of Lacey's bagnio, the grand Gothic narrative of the rabbit woman finally snags on the sharp edge of mundane reality. This chapter focuses on the slip, a porter caught in the shadows, a coin exchanged for a corpse, that brings the edifice crashing down. It is the moment where the supernatural dissolves into the sordid, and the high drama of the court is replaced by the gritty, pathetic mechanics of a con. The collapse of a lie is rarely a thunderclap. It is usually a whisper, a rustle, a small, inconsequential sound in the dark. For weeks, the hoax has been sustained by a conspiracy of silence and the sheer, blinding audacity of the claim. But a machine that runs on dead rabbits requires fuel. In the crowded, guarded rooms of the bagnio, the supply chain is the weak link. The magic trick requires a prestige, but it also requires a prop. It is December 4th. The bagnio is quiet, the heavy hitters of the medical world having retired for dinner or brandy, leaving behind the guards and the lesser attendants. In the shadows of the hallway, a figure moves. It is Thomas Howard, a porter at the bathhouse, a man whose job involves carrying towels and emptying chamber pots. He is a nobody in the grand drama, a silent extra. But tonight, he is the most important man in England. He is stopped by the keen eye of a skeptic, perhaps a servant of Manningham, or simply a guard who notices the man sweating on a cold night. "What do you have there?" the question comes. It is casual, almost bored. Thomas Howard freezes. He is not a master criminal. He is a porter trying to earn a few extra shillings. He mumbles. He shifts his weight. And then, under the pressure of a simple gaze, he folds. He reaches into his pocket, not a magical portal to the ether, but a greasy, lint-filled pocket of a woolen coat, and pulls out a rabbit. It is not a monster. It is a small, dead rabbit, limp and unremarkable. The confession spills out of him like dirty water. He was paid, he says. He was given money by the woman's sister-in-law to procure the animal. He was told to sneak it into the room. He was told it was for eating. A craving, they said. Just a simple craving for rabbit stew. The news travels up the chain of command like a spark on a fuse. It reaches Sir Richard Manningham. The great man midwife does not smile. He does not celebrate. He simply nods. The physical evidence has finally caught up with his intuition. The supernatural explanation, the maternal impression, the curse, the miracle, evaporates instantly. What remains is a small dead animal in a servant's pocket and a woman in a room upstairs who is no longer a medical marvel but a liar. Manningham marches back into the room. The atmosphere has changed. The deference is gone. He looks at Mary Toft, who lies in the bed, still feigning the exhaustion of her spectral labor. He holds up the testimony of the porter. He does not shout. He speaks with the terrifying, cold precision of a surgeon cutting out a tumor. "The game is up, Mary," he might say, though the records do not give us his exact words, only the weight of his intent. "We know about the porter. We know about the rabbit." But Mary Toft is not ready to let go. She has lived inside this lie for months. It has become her skin, her identity, her shield against the poverty that waits for her outside these walls. She denies it. She weeps. She claims the porter is lying, that he is an agent of her enemies. She throws herself into a fresh paroxysm of pain, her body thrashing, mimicking the birth pangs with a desperate, tragic intensity. She is an actress, refusing to leave the stage, even as the scenery is being dismantled around her. Manningham watches her. He sees the panic in her eyes. He knows that reason alone will not break her. She is fortified by the presence of John Howard, who still hovers nearby, pale and silent, perhaps realizing that the noose is tightening around his own neck. Manningham realizes that to extract the truth, he needs a tool sharper than logic. He needs fear. He turns to the other doctors. "If this is a natural phenomenon," he says loudly, ensuring Mary hears every syllable, "then we must understand the mechanism. I propose we perform a painfully strict examination. We must see inside the womb itself to find the source of these beasts." He lets the threat hang in the air. Surgery. In 1726, surgery is not a sterile procedure. It is a terrifying ordeal of agony and likely death. He is threatening to cut her open. He is threatening to turn the metaphor into reality. Mary's thrashing stops. The room goes silent. The labor ceases. For the first time, the rabbit woman looks at her captors and sees not an audience but executioners. The thread has snapped. The tapestry falls, and behind it there is nothing but a frightened woman and a dead rabbit. Chapter 9. The Verdict of Stone. The mystery ends not with a bang, but with a terrifying ultimatum. We witness the psychological dissection of Mary Toft. Sir Richard Manningham, abandoning the pretense of the gentle physician, brandishes the threat of the scalpel to extract the truth. This chapter details the collapse of the defense, the sordid confession of the mechanics of the fraud, and Mary's transfer from the celebrity of the bathhouse to the cold, stone reality of Tothill Fields Bridewell. The monster is revealed to be human, and the miracle is revealed to be a crime. Fear is the oldest language, the one tongue that every living creature speaks with perfect fluency. In the plush, stifling room of the bagnio, the language of Latin and the language of politeness have failed. Now Sir Richard Manningham speaks the language of steel. He stands over Mary Toft, his silhouette looming large against the dying firelight. He does not hold a weapon, but he holds a promise that is far more terrifying. He speaks of an experiment. He speaks of a surgery to examine the womb, to verify the internal structure that produces such beasts. He speaks, in veiled but unmistakable terms, of vivisection. "I will not be made a fool," his presence seems to say. "If you claim to be a monster, I will treat you as a specimen." Mary lies frozen on the bed. The exhaustion that drags at her limbs is no longer feigned. It is the crushing weight of reality. For months, she has been the puppet master, controlling the great men of London with a groan and a shudder. But the strings have been cut. She looks at John Howard, the country doctor who started it all, but he has retreated into the shadows, a broken man realizing that his own ambition has built a gallows. She looks at St. André, the king's anatomist, but he is manic, confused, his faith crumbling like dry bread. There is no one left to protect her. On the 7th of December, the dam breaks. It does not burst with a roar, but with a quiet, sobbing admission. Mary Toft sends away the others. She asks to speak to Manningham alone. And there, in the quiet of the room, the Gothic fairy tale dissolves into the grotesque mechanics of the barnyard. She confesses. The details are not magical, they are sordid. They are painful. She speaks of how she and her accomplices, sometimes Joshua, sometimes her sister-in-law, would procure the rabbits. She speaks of the knife used to strip the skin, of the careful, agonizing process of insertion. She describes how she would hide the parts in her pockets, or how they would be passed to her during the chaotic examinations. She reveals that the movements felt by the doctors were nothing more than her own muscles, trained to convulse on command, a biological puppetry performed through gritted teeth. It is a confession of desperate poverty and profound physical endurance. It reveals that the true horror was not what came out of her body, but what she was willing to put into it for the sake of a few guineas and a moment of fame. The room feels suddenly smaller, dirtier. The grand mystery that captivated a king is reduced to a woman mutilating herself in a desperate bid for survival. The reaction of the establishment is swift and brutal. The fascination evaporates, replaced by a cold, vindictive fury. Mary Toft is no longer a celebrity. She is a criminal. She is a cheat who has embarrassed the crown and made fools of the most learned men in Europe. She is stripped of her comforts. The soft bed of the bagnio is taken away. She is transferred to Tothill Fields Bridewell, a prison of grim reputation in Westminster. It is a place of stone and iron, where the air smells of unwashed bodies and despair. As she is led away, the mob that once cheered her now jeers. They throw filth. They laugh. The rabbit woman has become the rabbit impostor. She is cast into a cell, the heavy door slamming shut with a sound that echoes the finality of a coffin lid. Inside the prison, Mary falls into a deep depression. She is alone with the physical aftermath of her deception, the infection, the pain, the scarring. She is visited not by doctors wanting to witness a miracle, but by magistrates wanting to construct a prosecution. They press her for names. They want to know if the doctors were complicit. Was Howard in on it? Was St. André a fool or a conspirator? She weaves new stories, trying to protect some, blaming others, but the power is gone. She is just a prisoner in the dark, listening to the drip of water on stone, while outside, the city of London begins the cruel work of laughing at its own gullibility. The verdict of stone has been passed. The walls of the Bridewell hold her fast, a physical manifestation of the hard, cold truth that has replaced the phantom rabbits. The magic is dead. All that remains is the punishment. Chapter 10. The Legacy of Folklore. The carnival tents are struck, and the sawdust is swept away, leaving only the silence of humiliation. In the final chapter, we survey the wreckage of reputations. We watch as the sharp pen of William Hogarth immortalizes the scandal in satire, turning the tragedy into a national joke. We trace the fates of the men involved: St. André's descent into disgrace, Howard's retreat into obscurity, and the anticlimactic return of Mary Toft to the earth that spawned her. We conclude with a meditation on the fragility of truth and the enduring shadow of the rabbit in the age of reason. Laughter is the mechanism by which a society forgives itself for being foolish. In the weeks following the exposure of the hoax, London explodes not with anger but with mirth. The tension that had gripped the capital, the theological debates, the medical inquiries, the royal anxiety, snaps back like a rubber band, stinging everyone who held it. The rabbit woman becomes the punchline of every joke, the subject of every ballad sung in the alehouses. The fear of the unnatural is replaced by the comfort of the ridiculous. William Hogarth, the great chronicler of English vice and folly, picks up his etching needle. He does not use ink, he uses acid. He creates a print titled Cunicularii, or the Wise Men of Godalming in Consultation. In it, he depicts the scene of the birth not as a medical miracle but as a chaotic farce. St. André is there, looking manic and absurd. Howard is there, looking complicit. Rabbits scamper across the floor, mocking the learned men. The print is sold on every corner. It is pinned to the walls of coffee houses. It is the visual epitaph of the scandal, ensuring that for centuries to come, these men will be remembered not for their contributions to science, but for their credulity. The fallout for the experts is catastrophic. Nathaniel St. André, the man who flew too close to the sun on wings of wax and rabbit fur, crashes to earth. The king, embarrassed by his own association with the fraud, turns his back. The court closes its doors. St. André publishes a recantation, a desperate, rambling apology in which he admits to being imposed upon. But the public does not forgive arrogance easily. He loses his position. He loses his patience. He spends the rest of his life in a twilight of disgrace. A man who once held the king's ear, now reduced to a cautionary tale whispered in medical schools. He dies in poverty, the rabbit doctor to the end. John Howard retreats to Godalming. He is stripped of his dignity, prosecuted for his role in the conspiracy, though he manages to avoid the harshest penalties of the law. He returns to his practice, but the trust is gone. He is no longer the respected surgeon. He is the man who pickled the lies of a peasant woman. He fades into the gray history of Surrey, a ghost haunting his own life. And what of Mary? The law, in its strange mercy, does not hang her. The fraud was grotesque, yes, but it was not treason. It was a crime of poverty, a crime of the body. She is kept in the bridewell for a few months, displayed like a zoo animal to the curious who pay a coin to stare at the monster. But eventually, the novelty wears off. The city gets bored. She is released. She returns to Godalming. She returns to the mud, to the fields, to the anonymity of the rural poor. She does not die immediately. She lives for another 30 years, a quiet, invisible existence. One imagines her walking the heathlands, seeing the wild rabbits darting through the gorse, feeling a phantom ache in her belly. Did she regret it? Or did she look back on those few weeks in the bagnio, when she was the center of the world, when kings and dukes waited on her breath, as the only time she was truly alive? She dies in 1763. Her death is recorded in the parish register simply, Mary Toft, widow. No mention of the rabbits, no mention of the scandal that shook the throne. The earth takes her back, indifferent to the chaos she caused. The story of the rabbit woman is often dismissed as a historical oddity, a moment of madness in an otherwise rational age. But it is more than that. It is a mirror held up to the Enlightenment. It shows us that even in an era of telescopes and microscopes, the human mind is desperate for the marvelous. We want to believe that the world is stranger than it is. We want to believe that the boundaries of reality are permeable. St. André and Howard were not stupid men. They were men blinded by the desire to see a miracle. They looked at a woman in pain and saw a portal to a new world. They looked at a dead rabbit and saw life. They forgot the first rule of science. The light of reason is useless if you close your eyes. The room in Godalming is gone now. The bagnio in Leicester Fields has long since been demolished. But sometimes, when the wind blows across the Surrey hills, or when a sudden silence falls over a crowded London street, you can almost hear it. A scratching, a rustling, the sound of a lie clawing its way into the light. The candle flickers and dies. The darkness returns, but now you know what hides in it.